The Emperor and Erda. Some family arguments end with someone sleeping on the couch. This one ended with 20 superhuman babies being scattered across the galaxy. Long before the Imperium existed, the Emperor created the Primarchs with the help of Erda, one of humanity's oldest and most powerful perpetuals. The Primarchs even carried part of her genetic legacy, making Erda the closest thing they ever had to a mother. Then she decided she'd made a terrible mistake. Erda came to believe the Emperor never intended the Primarchs to be sons. To him, they were weapons built to conquer the galaxy. Convinced she was giving them a chance at real lives, she dispersed all 20 infant Primarchs through the warp, where each landed on a different world. Angren grew up as a gladiator slave. Mortarion was raised by a Xenos tyrant. Kurz became the terror of Nostromo. Horus became the War Master who nearly destroyed the Imperium. Every Primarch's life was changed. Few relationships in Warhammer 40k have caused more suffering. Two immortal visionaries created 20 sons together and ended up reshaping the fate of the galaxy forever. Guilliman and Yvraine. The internet has spent years trying to convince everyone that Warhammer 40k has a power couple. Games Workshop has never confirmed it. Guilliman would probably file a formal complaint about it, and Yvraine seems perfectly happy letting the rumors spread. Roboute Guilliman is the Primarch of the Ultramarines, the Emperor's greatest administrator and perhaps the most rational man in the Imperium. Yvraine is almost his complete opposite, a former gladiator from Camorra who died more than once before becoming the chosen emissary of Ennead, the Eldari god of the dead. By every rule in the galaxy, these two should never have become allies. Their story begins during the Gathering Storm. With Guilliman trapped in a death-like state for 10,000 years, Yvraine used the power of Ennead to help restore him to life. With Archmagos Belisarius Cawl and the mysterious Armor of Fate, she played a key role in bringing the Primarch back when the Imperium needed him most. After his resurrection, Yvraine didn't simply disappear. She and the Inari escorted Guilliman across a galaxy ripped apart by chaos, fighting through demonic invasions and Black Legion attacks so he could reach Terra. The two spent much of that journey talking, planning, arguing over strategy, and learning to trust someone they had every reason to hate. Guilliman never forgot that she was an Eldari. Yvraine never forgot that he represented the Imperium that had spent millennia waging war against her people. Even so, they kept choosing cooperation because the alternative was watching the galaxy burn. The novels repeatedly place them side by side in conversations where they show an unusual level of respect for one another. Guilliman listens to her advice instead of dismissing it outright, something almost unheard of for an Imperial leader dealing with Xenos. Yvraine, meanwhile, treats Guilliman less like an enemy and more like someone worth saving. That's where the memes came from, and fan art flooded the internet about Guilliman's Eldar girlfriend. Even Games Workshop seemed cool to let the community have its fun. Ghazghkull, Thraka, and Makari. Every great leader needs someone they can trust. Ghazghkull Thraka found that in a grot. Grots are the smallest members of orc society. They're weaker than orcs and spend most of their lives running away from orcs. Their daily routine usually consists of getting blamed for everything that goes wrong and trying not to become the nearest target when a boy gets bored. Makari isn't just another grot. He's Ghazghkull's sidekick and lucky charm. Wherever the greatest warboss of the age goes, Makari is usually somewhere nearby, either waving Ghazghkull's banner, shouting orders to boys 10 times his size, or desperately trying to stay out of the way when the fighting starts. Like any proper warboss, Ghazghkull still boots Makari across the battlefield from time to time, yells at him for things that aren't his fault, and generally treats him the way orcs treat grots. The difference is that if anyone else tries to kill Makari, they're likely to discover that the biggest orc in the galaxy suddenly has a problem with it. Makari has supposedly died more than once over the course of Ghazghkull's many campaigns, only to turn up again carrying the same banner as if nothing had happened. Whether that's because grots are surprisingly replaceable, because orc belief works in mysterious ways, or because Gork and Mork really do have a favorite is left unclear. Ghazghkull, for his part, has no doubts whatsoever. It's a relationship that somehow works for both of them. Makari gets the closest thing a grot will ever have to job security. Ghazghkull gets the one companion who has followed him through the Second and Third Wars for Armageddon and beyond, never staying dead for long and never straying far from his side. Fulgrim and the Laer Blade. Before the Horus Heresy, Fulgrim was the Primarch of the Emperor's children and the living definition of perfectionism. He wanted to master everything: warfare, art, music, diplomacy, even sculpture. Unfortunately, Slaanesh had a demon blade specifically designed for someone exactly like him. Fulgrim discovered the weapon during the cleansing of Laerin. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Then it began whispering. The demon trapped inside praised his talents, encouraged his ambitions, and quietly fed every flaw already hiding beneath the surface. It never had to force him to change. It simply convinced him that every terrible decision was another step toward perfection. Fulgrim grew obsessed and carried the blade everywhere. He trusted its guidance and listened to it more than his own brothers. By the time the Horus Heresy erupted, the sword's influence had become impossible to separate from Fulgrim's own desires. The relationship reached its breaking point at the Drop Site Massacre on Istvan V. Under the blade's influence, Fulgrim killed Ferrus Manus, his closest friend among the Primarchs. The horror of what he had done was so overwhelming that the demon briefly took complete control of his body, finishing the corruption it had spent years carefully nurturing. Fulgrim thought he found the perfect weapon, but what he actually got was a demon who loved telling him exactly what he wanted to hear. The tragedy of Fulgrim and the Laer blade is that the demon never really lied to him. It simply nudged him over and over toward the worst version of himself. The Silent King and Necrontyr. Millions of years before humanity existed, the Necrontyr ruled one of the greatest empires in the galaxy. There was just one problem: they were dying. Their sun flooded their worlds with deadly radiation, leaving them sickly, short-lived, and desperate to escape death. They begged the old ones for help, got rejected, and eventually fought a war they couldn't win. Then the Khârn showed up and promised immortal bodies made of living metal. All the Necrontyr had to do was give up their flesh. As their king, he accepted the bargain for his entire civilization. The Necrontyr became the Necrons, immortal machines that could survive for millions of years. But during biotransference, the Khârn stripped away and consumed their souls. They got the eternal bodies they wanted, but lost much of what made them who they were. By the time Zarek realized what that bargain had truly cost, it was already too late. Most leaders promised to take care of their people by sacrificing everything. The Silent King actually did it, but in the process, he accidentally doomed their entire species. Khârn Gorechild. Khârn the Betrayer is one of Khorne's greatest mortal champions and one of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy. Once the fighting starts, even his allies know to stay out of his way because Khârn doesn't always stop to check whose side you're on. That's exactly how he earned the name the Betrayer during the Horus Heresy. Friend, foe, fellow world eater. It often makes little difference once the blood begins to flow. One companion, however, has remained at his side through every battle: Gorechild. Originally forged for Angron, Gorechild is one of the most famous chain axes in Warhammer 40k. Its brutal teeth were from the fangs of Myca dragons. Angron discarded it as damaged at the Battle of Armatura and walked away. Khârn retrieved it from the dirt in defiance of Legion tradition and had it repaired. Since then, Khârn has carried it through some of the bloodiest battles in Imperial history, from the Siege of Terra to countless massacres across the galaxy. Unlike almost everything else in Khârn's life, Gorechild is treated with respect. He personally maintains the weapon after battle, keeping it in perfect condition despite centuries of constant use. In a life defined by bloodshed and betrayal, it's one of the very few things he has never neglected. That's what makes this relationship so bizarre. The galaxy's most infamous betrayer has remained completely loyal to exactly one thing: his axe. The Haemonculus and the Captive. The Haemonculi of Camorra are the greatest flesh crafters in Warhammer 40k. They're masters of surgery, genetics, and biological engineering, capable of rebuilding shattered bodies, growing new organs, creating living monsters, and reconstructing someone from the smallest scraps of surviving tissue. That becomes a serious problem if you ever become one of their favorite captives. Most prisoners in Camorra eventually die under torture. A prized captive doesn't get that luxury. A Haemonculus may keep the same victim for decades or even centuries, constantly reshaping their body, testing new creations, and pushing the limits of pain without ever letting them escape through death. If the captive finally dies, a skilled Haemonculus can rebuild them from whatever living tissue remains and simply continue the experiment. Over time, the relationship becomes strangely personal, but only from one side. The Haemonculus remembers every operation, every scar, and every improvement they've made over the years. To them, this isn't just another prisoner, it's their life's work, a masterpiece they've invested far too much time to abandon. The captive, meanwhile, is trapped in the closest thing Warhammer 40k has to an eternal abusive relationship. Most people eventually move on. A Haemonculus doesn't. Once they've decided you're the one, even death isn't enough to end the relationship. Typhus and Nurgle. Some people spend their whole lives looking for purpose. Typhus found his in a giant plague god who loves him exactly the way he is. Most champions of chaos didn't fall overnight. They were tempted, manipulated, or slowly worn down until there was nothing left but devotion. Callus Typhon, first captain of the Death Guard, skipped that part entirely. Long before the Horus Heresy reached its height, Typhon was already a secret follower of Nurgle. Then he got the perfect opportunity when the Death Guard fleet fought its way through the warp on the journey to Terra. Typhon secretly sabotaged the fleet, ensuring the entire Legion became trapped deep within the warp with no hope of escape. Cut off from the outside, Nurgle unleashed the horrifying Destroyer Plague. Warriors who had survived 1,000 battlefields suddenly rotted alive inside their own armor. Disease spread through every ship. Even Mortarion, the Primarch who had built his reputation on enduring poison and hardship, was powerless to save his sons. Everything was unfolding exactly the way Typhon wanted. With the Legion dying around him, he called out to Nurgle, offering his Primarch, his brothers, and himself to the Plague God. Nurgle answered immediately. Mortarion became a demon Primarch. The Death Guard were transformed into plague-ridden servants of chaos. Typhon himself emerged as Typhus, host of the Destroyer Hive and Nurgle's most devoted herald. And unlike the other Chaos Gods, Nurgle actually seems to care about his followers in his own horrifying way. He calls them his children, delights in their gifts, and rewards those who spread his blessings across the galaxy. And Typhus found the one who loved him back. By 40k standards, that's about as healthy as a relationship gets. It just happens to involve boils, flies, and the worst body odor in the galaxy. Thanks for watching until the end. Click here to check out another video and see you in the next one.